So for batch 3, welcome to HR. For batch 2, again I would like to welcome you, right? And for PCM, this is your home ground anyway, right? So from today we are going to go ahead with HR. Simple specifications regarding the modus operandi of these sessions, right? Again I am reiterating and again I am specifying them. At the beginning of the subject we would have a bunch of generalizations with respect to that particular subject, right? I would dictate those generalizations. Thank you. I would explain those generalizations, right? I would dictate those generalizations, I would explain those generalizations as such. And once we see that, then we would focus upon the important clusters which are constantly being questioned in the exam. I would specify those clusters and then we would get into the subject, right? And as we proceed across the subject, we would have some running notes and some dictations wherever it is required, right? And major focus is on consolidations, and the last day of the subject will be discussing PYQs to a larger extent. And one disclaimer that I always put whenever I am discussing PYQs is, whenever I am discussing PYQs, I would not discuss them on the basis of knowledge, rather I would use techniques to solve PYQs, because whatever knowledge that is required regarding your PYQs is any given day taken care through my notes, right? And with respect to this, we would be solving using techniques in the context of PYQs. And one more small disclaimer that I would like to make regarding HR notes, right? Those who would have already heard me knows what is the disclaimer. So, getting into the subject of economy. On an average, I would see that 15 questions are from economy. And you have to definitely understand one thing here, that economy is equally important as that of polity. What is the basis for me to make that statement that economy is equally important as that of polity? I see that 15 questions from polity and 15 questions from economy, in total 30 questions. These are the questions which are purely depending upon my knowledge. That means these questions are going to be very direct, and if I have my basic conceptual clarity regarding these topics and these areas, I would be more than comfortable to solve these questions in the exam hall. And I would say this is a basket which is going to definitely give you at least 50 to 55 marks. And you know that it is all about moving closer to our magic figure, that is 100. Right? Economy will play a very, very important role in driving you closer towards this 100 cutoff, and that is where I am telling you it's as important as polity that you study. Apart from that, when you look at the nature of questioning that is seen to be happening in economy, we see that there are two areas, right? There are two areas which are seen. One is the static part, the other one is current affairs. But for some reason there is a lot of misconception that is seen to be going on, thinking that there are more current affairs, less static. No. Strangely, we see the dominance of static more than current affairs in the context of economy. And if I am saying 15 questions on an average from economy, I would see 12 questions from static, 3 questions from current affairs. That means almost 3/4 of my proportion comes from static. And whatever current affairs it is being asked, one simple thing that we would see is we will be able to tackle them using generalizations, right? When I am going to dictate the bunch of generalizations here, you would see that you could handle those questions by using those generalizations, right? Even if you don't revise, even if you're worried about what is going to happen in current affairs, should I read whole economic survey, should I read Not required. With the basic bunch of generalizations that I would dictate, you would be able to manage that current affairs basis questions. Now, when you look at the general trend in economy, you see that there was one era up to 2016 where I had my all basics being asked. Right? In the sense, mostly questions from accounting used to come. Mostly questions from monetary policy used to come till 2016. But post 2016, there was one transitionary period till 2019 where I would see institutional based economy used to come. In the sense, on the depending upon institutions related to fiscal policy, institutions related to monetary policy, aspects regarding Niti Aayog. So we see some bunch of institutional economics coming into the picture. After 2019, for some reason till 2024, we see one section taking the center platform, that is the financial markets. The share of questioning on financial markets became more, be it money markets, be it capital markets, be it debt markets, be it equity markets. We see that different kinds of financial instruments have been seen and have been questioned from the side of UPSC, and for some reason that has happened. And if you go back and cross-check 2024 question paper as well, you would see that there were approximately 5 questions from financial markets and financial instruments. So that became a very, very important section in the recent past, right? So on an average, I still see some basics coming from monetary policy. I still see questions coming from fiscal policy, right? That share is any given day there, but the problem is the share of financial markets has increased. Now, keeping that, there are some hotspots which are seen in the context of economy. That means these sections are definitely questioned from the side of UPSC. And when you look at these sections which are generally questioned from the side of UPSC, one area that I see is inflation. Inflation, I always have one or the other question coming into the picture. The second thing that I see is with respect to international economics, that is the current account and the capital account. And if I have to tell you, one area of questioning again has been agriculture. Although I see agriculture converging with some aspects of geography, but I see agriculture from the economic dimension is also being questioned. It might be with respect to trade, it might be with respect to trends, it might be with respect to exports, production, area. I see different areas of it being focused. Apart from this, I also see one hotspot that I observe here is on exchange rates. Exchange rates, definitely we see one or the other question coming, and the various parameters affecting the exchange rate. As I was just making a passing reference, that is with respect to the financial markets and financial instruments. That is one more area of questioning in the recent past which has become extremely important on the side of UPSC. And sometimes I see miscellaneous economics coming into the picture. And when I see this miscellaneous economics coming into the picture, the miscellaneous economics is with respect to international institutions. And majorly I see UPSC focuses on 3 institutions. One is WTO, World Bank and IMF. We see that these 3 are the institutions at the global level where we see a constant questioning coming, that is WTO, World Bank and IMF. And in fact, till 2016, as I was talking about institutional economics, I see that every year we had a question on WTO, especially with respect to the 6 different kinds of agreements of WTO. Agreement on agriculture, TRIMS. There are different kinds there are different kinds of agreements which are seen with respect to WTO, and we constantly have seen a questioning coming from there. Right? So in general, in its totality, we see that these are the 6 sections where we find economy questioning repeatedly coming in UPSC. Now with that basic understanding, please write down some bunch of generalizations for this subject of economy. anything that is real in economy, anything that is real in economy is adjusted to inflation. Anything that is real in economy is adjusted to inflation. Next, anything that is indexed, anything that is indexed is adjusted to inflation, is adjusted to inflation. Next, anything that is elastic, anything that is elastic is known to have a relative change, is known to have a relative change. Next, anything that is gilt, anything that is gilt is related to government. Anything that is gilt is related to government. Next, anything that is marginal, anything that is marginal has a respective change, has a respective change. Next, anything that is net, anything that is net is adjusted to depreciation, is adjusted to depreciation. Anything that is revenue, anything that is revenue or money, anything that is revenue or money is short term, is short term. Next, anything that is capital, anything that is capital is long term, anything that is capital is long term. Next, anything that is risky, anything that is risky is rewarding in nature, is rewarding in nature. In financial markets, in financial markets. Next, anything that is flexible or convertible, anything that is flexible or convertible is less rewarding, is less rewarding. Next, anything that is constant, anything that is constant is adjusted to inflation, is adjusted to inflation. Next, anything that is market related, anything that is market related is flexible, comma free, comma liberal, comma self-controlling, and self-correcting, Next, in economy, there is a continuous competition. In economy, there is a continuous competition between money and financial instruments. Between money and financial instruments. Next, most of the sectors in India are market driven, are market driven, but some sectors are still regulated by government. But some sectors are still regulated by government. For example, price of urea, prices of petrol and diesel, atomic minerals, banking and exchange rate, railways, defense, and telecom spectrum, Next, this was which point? 14. 15th point. Everything in economy is dependent upon supply and demand of both related and unrelated sectors of the economy. Next, nothing in Indian economy is steady, consistent, rapid. Nothing in economy is steady, consistent, rapid, and always. Next, agriculture in India is never consistent. Agriculture in India is never consistent and not so positive as it is dependent upon fluctuating rainfall. Next, industrial sector in economy is very stagnant as mostly Indian industrialization is capital intensive. Next, 19. Now what I am dictating is 19th. Yes, write down. In India, The perception on service sector. The perception on service sector is positive. Is positive. And any positive statement in the exam, regarding service sector, is a right statement. Next, most of the times, India's international contributions are restricted to 2%, in bracket you write 2% rule. Next, in Indian economy, if the factor mentioned and the changes in the factor being observed in the past decade, it is definitely affected by the respective impact of COVID-19. Definitely affected by the respective impact of COVID-19. Yes, 21. Yes, beautiful. Okay. Pay a little attention, I'll explain each of this. Now when I'm saying first, I told you anything real is what? Adjusted to inflation. That simply means I see that anything real is derived when I subtract inflation from nominal. So when I want to get a real factor or when I want to get a constant factor, I see that anything that is constant is adjusted to inflation with respect to what? The current again. Right? So that is what I mean by anything that is real in economy means it is adjusted to inflation and we are arriving at what? Constant, or I can also say this is more or less present. One. Then whenever I say that something is indexed in the economy, for example, we have something called as IIB, inflation indexed bonds. When I say inflation indexed bonds, what is the simple understanding here is whatever interest rate that I derive from this bond, I am adjusting that to what? I am adjusting that to the factor of inflation. That means when I say indexing in Indian economy, it simply means adjustment. Right? Now for suppose if I say price indexing, when I say price indexing, income indexing, inflation indexing, that means I am adjusting the respective factor with the change in that factor which I am referring there. Price indexing means what? I am adjusting the price. Income indexing means what? adjusting the income. So that means anything that is indexed that in the Indian economy is dealing with adjustments. And we also come across some factor called as elastic. We say elasticity. And when we talk about this income elasticity, price elasticity, tax elasticity, now whenever we come across this particular concept of elasticity, elasticity deals with relative change. When I am talking about price elasticity, for suppose, although we would deal with them, when we talk about price elasticity, you have to understand that price elasticity is talking about what? The change in demand vis-a-vis the change in price. The change in demand vis-a-vis the change in price. When I say tax elasticity, what is happening in tax elasticity, you have to understand, I see the change in tax revenue vis-a-vis the change in tax rates. Right? I change in tax revenue vis-a-vis the change in tax rates. So that means what am I saying? Anything that is elastic in Indian economy is dealing with changes. Right? So that is another thing that you have to observe. Then anything that is net is nothing but gross minus depreciation. Anything that is net is what? Anything that is net is gross minus depreciation. That is where I say anything that is net is adjusted to what? Depreciation. Anything that is revenue or anything that is money, it is dealing with what? Short term. And anything that is short term in Indian economy is what? It is less than 1 year. Anything that is short term in Indian economy is less than 1 year. Now when you look at treasury bills, right, when you talk about T-bills as part of your G-Secs or government securities, you see that those are meant for short-term instruments. Now when you look at your corporate bonds, right, or when you look at this, many of these systems which are revenue, which are money oriented, those are what? Those are short-term, and what is happening? Less than 1. And anything that is capital, I told you it simply means long-term. And what is the time period in Indian economy? Long term means more than 1 year. Now when you talk about capital gains tax, CGT, in the context of capital gains tax, we have two types of capital gains tax. One is short term CGT, the other one is long term CGT. When I say short term CGT or short term capital gains tax, it simply means whatever is the capital gains I have had for last 1 year, I will have to pay tax on that. I call it as short term. But if I had some capital gains beyond this 1 year, I am calling it as long term. Although I have another bracket when I am discussing with CGT, there you would see it is 1 year, it is 1 to 3 years, and 3 to 5 years, and then above 5 years. We have different brackets in CGT, capital gains tax. But otherwise, in general, what you understand, something which is short term, something which is long term is less than 1 year and more than 1 year respectively. Then again, whenever I am going to discuss about financial instruments, your financial instruments can be with respect to money markets, capital markets, equity markets, debt markets, all sorts of things. It might be with respect to bonds, debentures, right, your convertible bonds, those different kinds of things that we would discuss there. And when you look at financial instruments, one simple funda here is any financial instrument that is risky is definitely more rewarding. You'd have seen that scam 1992 or what is that? Arshad Mehta's, right? Chaptadga. What is the slogan for prelims examination? Risk lenide rasku kuda dorukadu. That is a slogan for prelims examination, because at any given day you say I am going to attempt everything by knowledge, it is not going to happen. Right? Maximum how many questions can you attempt using knowledge? 30. Beyond that, Jugad. Right? That you would understand when I am teaching you PYQs. Right? So, risky, rewarding. Apart from this, something which is flexible is less rewarding. Now, why something which is flexible is less rewarding? For suppose if I say what is the flexibility, there we would talk about something called as convertible factors. Convertible factors, that means suddenly it is debt and my debt is risky. When I convert it to equity, do you think I will get the same amount of returns? No. Why? Because I have an option of escaping this risk and minimizing this risk. And what is my funda? When there is less risk, is it more rewarding or less rewarding? Less rewarding. Right? So that is one funda we would use whenever we are discussing about the financial markets. And one more, always remember, my dear, whenever I talk about my investments or whenever I am looking at anything in the market, I only have two things. One, either I have money or something which is not money. Now when I say I have money, money here for me, it simply means dealing with cash. And if it is not money, and if I am still saying that it has some financial nature, it simply means what? Here. Now for example, bond. For example, asset. For example, savings. Now that means what is happening? I can only have two. If I have more of this, then definitely less of this. Right? If I have more of that, definitely less of this. If I have less of this, definitely it is more of this. Now in case, if I see that money is also more, not money is also more, it simply means I see there is some unnecessary money which has entered the market. That is the only breaching condition that I find in the economy, that in case if I see money is also more and the financial savings are also more, I can only have one condition this to be supported, that is the black money. And you know black money is not taxable, which is not taxed, which is not accounted. It's all completely different. So one thing that you have to observe is always there is a mutual exclusion which is existing in the system. If somebody is selling I have 10 rupees, only two aspects. This 10 rupees can be converted into lace packet. If I have lace packet, it simply means I don't have this 10 rupees. And when I have this 10 rupees, it simply means I don't have this lace packet. But if I am having 10 rupees and if I am having lace packet, it simply means 10 rupees is black money. Leda na friend. Right? So that is what is one thing that you will always have to remember in this context of economy, whatever we are dealing with. And we know that Indian economy is majorly what? It's a mixed system. And when I say it is a mixed system, what do you categorically observe if it is a mixed system? I see that there is role of government as well as private. There is role of government as well as private, which is seen in the mixed system. Or I can also see a necessary combination of public sector undertakings and private organizations operating together. And that is where I come across these mixed systems that are present. If not this, here you also have to understand that there is another interpretation of a mixed economy. When I say this mixed economy, I see that it has a combinations of regulations and market norms. And something which is regulated is what it is majorly done by the governmental institutions. Most of your regulatory bodies that are existing, that is RBI, SEBI, CCI, Competition Commission of India, all these are what? Regulatory bodies. And when you see these regulatory bodies which are seen to be existing, they have the necessary regulatory regime which is existing. On the other side, I also have market is one system which is controlling by itself. Now you would have seen whole of your market is driven by the principle of what? Supply and demand. Whole of your market is driven by the principle of supply and demand. That is why a 2020 economic survey refers market to be what? An invisible hand. It says it is an invisible hand which is going to balance the fluctuations that are existing in supply and demand. So that is one small thing that you will have to understand with respect to this mixed systems that are present, right? And rest of the generalizations we would come across whenever we are solving questions in PYQs and whenever I am handling the subject. ठीक है? Well, look at economic systems. We see one is centralized system, the other one is market driven system. One is a centralized system, the other one is the market driven system. Write down under centralized systems. Government is regulator. Government is regulator and also indulges in business. And also indulges in business. Next, planning is prime factor. Planning is prime factor in centralized economy. Planning is prime factor in centralized economy. Next, dominance of government. Dominance of government. Next, business mainly done by the government. Business mainly done by the government. Next, public sector dominates private sector. Public sector dominates private sector. Next, under market driven systems, write down. Government is facilitator. Government is facilitator. Next, dominance by market forces. Dominance by market forces. Next, liberal policy making. Liberal policy making. Next, competition as the central character. Competition as the central character. Next, dominance of private sector over public sector. Dominance of private sector over public sector. Next, multiple players. Multiple players with respect to particular sector. Multiple players with respect to particular sector. Last point. A conducive ecosystem. A conducive ecosystem. A conducive ecosystem for startups. A conducive ecosystem for startups or entrepreneurship. A conducive ecosystem for startups or entrepreneurship. Right? Now one side I see competition existing. Other side you observe that there are two factors. One is monopoly, the other one is monopsony. When you look at monopoly, monopoly talks about single seller. Monopoly talks about single seller, whereas monopsony talks about single buyer. Single seller and single buyer. What is the present status of market? If I have to divide, I see that from 1950 till 1980, it was all the factor of government which was dominating the private sector. From 1980 till 1991, we slowly start seeing what? The government and the private sector right? Coming on an equal platform to a larger extent. And slowly from 1991 I would say till 2019, I would see this equation of private sector dominating the government. Why am I dividing 2019? 2019 watershed moment, that is COVID-19. I see that the whole of the thing started changing at that point of time. And here again I see that private sector dominating the government sector. But one small thing that you have to observe, that in 1991 to 2019 we majorly had some factors of monopoly. That means we could see that still there were single sellers in the market which were existing. But when we see post 2019, what happened post 2019, we see one major revolution that happened is the digitization. Where you see the India happens to be the largest volume or largest number of digital transactions which are happening in the world. And when we see this digitization happening during COVID-19, post that we have one definite trend that is existing, that is monopsony. Now for example, if I have to give you one simple example of monopsony, Amazon. Amazon is what? Monopsony. You see that is a very, very large buyer. Now don't say that is large seller. It is not selling one brand. It is selling multiple things. So that means what? It is in fact one of the largest buyers, and we see we are at the era of monopsony and we have transitioned from monopoly. So that is one simple understanding when you look at the transition of the economy that has happened. Now keeping that in mind, when we look at the systems of market, we see that every system of market that is seen to be existing is majorly driven by supply and demand. As we are dealing with macro systems, we are not talking about house economics, and we are neither discussing about the micro systems. These are supply and demand. And what kind of supply and demand? These are majorly aggregate supply and demand. Because we are dealing with macro systems, so we are talking about aggregate supply and demand to a larger extent. Now here, first let's understand the dynamics of demand. And before I proceed into this, one small disclaimer. Whatever economy that I teach you for next 6 days is not academic economics, right? If there is any economist in my class, please bear with my ignorance, because whatever I am going to teach you is only pure exam economics. And whatever economy you have learned so far, please forget for some time, right? Whatever I am teaching you, please pick it up, because if you follow this pattern only, you will get questions right. Otherwise, if you use your academic economics and no, I am going to be Amartya Sen, problematic, right? So that is one disclaimer that I put with respect to any economy session that I am dealing for prelims examination, right? Exam economics, the logic is very simple, because the law of supply and demand itself will falter here. That is how the exam is being questioned. But if I use academic economics and try solving law of supply and demand questions in exam, 99.9% you would get them wrong, right? After a lot of experimentation, things have been devised. Okay? So when we look at this demand, we see that demand as such is seen from the side of consumption. It is seen from the side of consumption, and demand has a relation with multiple factors. One factor it has is the demand of other goods, right? Demand of one good will have impact because of the demand of other goods. Next, with respect to price, then demand will also have an impact with respect to income, and demand will also have an impact with respect to any given day the strength of India population, right? So that is one simple aspect. I see the demand fluctuating with any of these factors going on. For example, in the first one, tea versus coffee, right? When I see more demand for tea, I see less demand for coffee. When I see more demand for coffee, I see less demand for tea. On later date, we would talk about what kind of goods are these. Are they substitutes or are they complementary goods? We would see that. Now keeping that, when we look at the first factor, that is with respect to price, one simple understanding is, as the price increases, what is happening to demand? Decreases. And as the price decreases, what is happening to demand? Increases. If I see this respective change happening, these are normal goods. That means they are behaving normally. In case, if wherever I see price is increased or decreased, but I don't see any change in the demand, irrespective of price of the good, when I don't see any change in the demand, these are inferior goods. For example, kerosene. Right? Even if kerosene becomes cheap, you don't buy more kerosene. Unless and until you have some plans. Right? But otherwise, in general, we don't buy more kerosene because it became cheap. Now, in fact, these days, rice is also an inferior good. Yes or no? Definitely. After now, in case if I say whey protein cost is reduced, people would buy more whey protein. But if rice cost is reduced, no, people are on health conscious diets. Right? So, we see that is one. Apart from this, there is one peculiar trend that you observe, that when the price increases, the demand increases. That is the third probability. And when this price increases and the demand increases, there are two kinds. One, some luxury products have this. Irrespective of iPhone price, people have it. iPhone 16, iPhone 18, what is going on now? 16 Pro.
16 Pro.
Oh, posh kids. Right? Right? So luxury products, or some things are non-luxury. When we see these goods which are luxury, which have this relation of price increasing and the demand increasing, these goods are Veblen goods. These goods are Veblen goods. And when we look at non-luxury, price increasing and demand increasing, these are Giffen goods. These are Giffen goods. Right? Then, of price increasing, now you talk about chicken. అంతే కదా, ఇప్పుడు నువ్వు కేజీ కొనాలని ఫిక్స్ అయ్యావు, అది 200 ఉంటే ఏమి 300 ఉంటే జోబులో 500 ఉంది, అయ్యేది అయితే కొండం పక్క. రైట్ కాదా? ఆల్కహాలా? గుడ్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ మై డియర్, వెరీ గుడ్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఇన్ ఫ్యాక్ట్. Irrespective. Beautiful, right? ఇంకొద్దు దాని గురించి చర్చ వద్దు ఇప్పుడు. Right? Next, with respect to income. Alcohol? Giffen. Ante. It depends. Right now, you say some posh brands. నాకు పేర్లు తెలియదు అనుకో. ఎందుకు నవ్వుతావు? మేబీ దాట్ కుడ్ కమ్ ఫ్రమ్ దట్ సైడ్. అదేదో చెప్తారంటే కదా, 60,000 ఒక చిన్న బాటిల్ ఏదో ఉంటుంది అంటారు. నో, మందంతా చీప్ లిక్కర్ బ్యాచ్. రైట్? సో వెన్ యు సీ ఇన్కమ్, as the income increases, what happens to demand? Increases. As the income decreases, the demand decreases. Now always understand from which side to which side I am going. This is the condition in geography, this is the condition in economy. Cause, effect. But the beauty of this is effect can also be cause. But ensure that what am I fixing as cause, what am I fixing as effect. Right? So in the context of economy, I am looking at income vis-a-vis demand. When I am looking at population, when I am looking at the factor of population, Now here please, my assumption is all of the population are consumers. That's my assumption. That's my assumption there. And in that context, what is happening as the population increases, what is happening to demand? Increases. If the population reduces, what is happening to demand? Reduces. Now, here we come across one very, very important concept called as elasticity. I see that a respective change in a factor changing the demand. A respective change in the factor changing the demand. I already told you, anything that is elastic and anything that is related to elasticity implies that there is some change. And when we look at these aspects of elasticity, I see that there are two major elasticities which are to be considered here. One is the aspect of price elasticity, the other one is the aspect of income elasticity. And when you look at these aspects of price elasticity and income elasticity, in the context of price elasticity, we see a respective change in price resulting in respective change in demand. Respective change in price resulting in respective change in demand, that is what is price elasticity. When I look at income elasticity, a respective change in income resulting in respective change in the demand. A respective change in income resulting in respective change in demand, that is what is income elasticity. And I also see it is not necessary that all the goods are elastic. It is not necessary that all the goods are elastic. I can see that a good can be elastic good or inelastic good. A good can be elastic good or inelastic good. When I say elastic good, it simply means there is a proportionate change which is happening. When I say elastic good, it simply means there is a proportionate change. But when I say it is inelastic good, it simply means there is negligible change which is happening. There is negligible change which is happening. I see that there is one derivative of this which is existing, which is called as super elastic. A good can also be super elastic. A good can also be super elastic, where you observe a small change in the factor will result in an infinite change. A small change in the factor will result in infinite change. And when I see that infinite change happening because of a small change, I am calling it as super elastic. Don't you think iPhone is a super elastic good? Definitely no. Just imagine, say around it is 1.5 lakhs if I say. In that I am telling you that I am going to give you concession of 10,000 rupees. Automatically the demand is going to be what? Skyrocketing there. So that means what is happening, generally the super elastic goods are luxury goods. Generally the super elastic goods are luxury goods, what is seen there. Next. There is one small factor that you also have to understand as part of elasticity is employment elasticity. Employment elasticity. When you look at employment elasticity means a respective change in GDP or a respective change in growth resulting in respective change of employment. Resulting in the respective change of employment. Right? And you have to understand all sectors don't have employment elasticity. All sectors don't have employment elasticity, and if I have to talk about the employment elasticity being efficient, I can definitely tell you it is with respect to the industrial sector. If the industrial sector grows, automatically I see more number of jobs being created. And when I see this conversion that is happening, that is where I can talk about elasticity. But if I have to tell you one more factor, I see that India underwent a phase of negative employment elasticity. And when I talk about this negative employment elasticity as a factor here, you see that India had seen a phase called as jobless growth. India had seen a phase called as jobless growth. That means what? One side the growth was happening, but one side employment was near zero. And when we look at that factor, that is what? Negative employment elasticity. So that is one simple understanding that you will have to remember. And write down one line. In India, the most elastic sector is the construction workers. The most elastic sector is the construction workers. Right? Now, we have seen all of these factors. In fact, we have seen price, we have seen income, population, but we'll have to look at this. Now, when we talk about the demand being affected by price of other goods, when we see the impact being affected by the price of other goods, you see that there are two kinds of goods which I can talk about. One is the complementary good. The other one is the substitute good. One is the complementary good and the other one is substitute good. Now when you look at this complementary good, what is happening is, for suppose if I say X plus C. Complementary good is what? I am adding something to that. For example, sugar to tea. Tea is a good. Sugar is a complementary good which is added. And when I look at this complementary good, what is observed? When the price of the complementary good increases, you see that the price of the original good also increases. When the price of the complementary good increases, the price of the original good also increases. And when the price of the original good increases, don't you think there is a corresponding change in demand? Yes. There is a corresponding change in demand. I'll give you one simple example. Now for suppose you say normal chai versus Nilofer chai. इसमें क्या फर्क है? Complementary good का price. अब मान लो same ingredients, tea, milk, sugar, same. But what is changing? Cost of milk. Now when the cost of milk is changing, what is happening? The cost of the original good is changing. What we drink here normal chutku sa chai is what? 12. But what we drink in 80 rupees. Right? Here we will have 100 people drinking, here we will have 10 people. But although that falters with respect to Nilofer chai, for some reason it appears as if somebody is distributing it for free of cost. Right? But in general I am telling you. Right? So that is what is one thing that you have to observe with respect to complementary good. Now when you look at substitute good, substitute is opposite to original. Substitute is opposite to original. Here is what? The complementary is addition to original. Complementary is additional to original. Here substitute is what? Opposite to original. That means what do we see? If I say that the price of the substitute good increases, when the price of the substitute good increases, automatically what is happening? The demand for the substitute good decreases. And when the demand for the substitute good is decreasing, the demand for the original good increases. The demand for the original good increases. Now in general, most of us drink tea, not coffee. Why? Coffee is comparatively costly. 20 rupees coffee, 12 rupees tea. Yes? So when it is 20 rupees, price of the substitute is high. The demand for coffee is less. Automatically the demand for tea increases. Right? So that is one more factor that you will have to observe with respect to this. In fact, in 2021 we had 2 questions just on this section. Now when they get into core economics, then it might become little troublesome whenever we are answering those sections. Right? So this is in the context of demand. The next factor which is very, very important for us to understand is from the side of supply. Now when we look at this aspects with respect to supply, we have many factors which are affecting the supply. And when we look at these factors affecting the supply, we see that these are nothing but factors of production. I see there are 4 factors which are the factors of production. One is the land, the other one is the labor, the other one is the capital, the other one is the enterprise. When you look at land, now understand one thing here. If any factor changes, or if any price of the factor changes, I see that there is going to be change in supply. And if there is any change in supply, there is change in price of the good. Here I am talking about price of the factor. Here I am talking about price of the good. Be very clear. When I see the cost of the factor changing, I see supply changing. When supply changes, price automatically changes. Why? Because I see a silent intermediate existing in the middle, that is demand. Right? What is my assumption? When supply increases, demand decreases. I am again telling you, not academic economics but exam economics. When supply decreases, what is happening to demand? Right? We are only looking at mutual exclusive systems here. Right? Now when you look at land, what is happening when the cost of land increases? When the cost of land increases, that means the cost of land increasing means even I can say when the rent increases. I see that the cost of production increasing or not? Yes, cost of production increasing. When the cost of production increases, what is happening to the price of good? Increases. Look at this translation. Factor change, supply changing, price changing. Factor price, good price. When you look at labor, you see that when the cost of labor increases in the form of what, my dear? In the form of wage. When the cost of labor increases, what is seen to be happening? Again, you see that the cost of production increases. When the cost of production increases, what is happening to the price of the good? Increases. Price of the good increases. Now when you look at capital, that means when we say that the cost of capital increasing, cost of capital here simply means what, my dear? It simply means when the interest rate increases. When the interest rate increases, I see cost of capital. When the cost of capital increases, automatically what is happening? I see that the cost of production increases. What is happening to the price? Increases. And when you look at enterprise, now here increasing enterprise, my assumption is when I look at when they would want to have more profit margins. When they want to have more profit margins, automatically what is happening, my dear? The cost of production increases. The cost of production increases. When the cost of production increases, what is happening to the price of the good? Increasing. What is happening to the price of the good? Increasing. So one is with respect to enterprise, profit margin, cost of production and the respective price. Now here, as I already told you that there is a silent translation which is happening here, that when I see there is greater supply, I see that there is lesser demand. I see that there is lesser demand. When I see that there is lesser demand, what is happening to the price? Decreases. Now this price is very different from this price. Please understand this factor. Price of the factor, price of the good. Yes? Now whatever I am seeing here, it is post-production. Whatever I am seeing here during the process of production. Right? During the process of production here, whatever I am seeing is from the product side. From the product side. And when I see that the supply is less, automatically what is happening to the demand? Increases. What is happening to the price? Increases. Supply, product, demand of the product and the price of the product. That means, let me summarize this discussion for you. When I say supply, supply can be seen from the side of producers, whatever we have seen in the previous slide, and supply can be seen from the side of consumers. And when we look at this from the side of producers, I am telling you that when the cost of production increases, when the cost of production increases, will the producers be producing more or producing less? Yes. They would be producing less. Fantastic. When I am looking with respect to cost of production from the side of the producers, I have 100 rupees of my budget, but somebody is demanding 20 rupees already as part of my wage. What is left over for me to produce here? 80 rupees. Now will I be able to produce more or will I be producing less? Are you understanding this? Now when I look at, I am looking at from the side of consumer. I see that when the supply is more, when the supply is more, what is happening to the price? Decreases. Don't you think that's what happens from the side of agriculture? Maneppudu tomato 2 kg 4 rupayలు, 2 kgs 4 rupees. Sir, how do you know? I know, ante. Koni cheppukolem, ante. So 2 kgs tomatoes 4 rupees. Now what is happening there? More supply, less price. But what do we expect? From the side of the producers, we expect more price, more profit margin. Are you understanding? So please be very clear in economy from which side are we looking. I have both sides. Producer hai, consumer. Supply, demand. Cause, effect. Be very, very clear from which direction am I seeing this. And once you're pretty sure about from which direction are you seeing this, there is no iota of doubt that you will get the question wrong. All that you will have to do whenever you see economy question is fix from which side are you looking. And who is going to give you the clue from which side you are looking? The examiner is going to give you the clue. So you need not worry at all with respect to these basic operations. It all depends upon, just write down one line. If UPSC does not specifically mention, if UPSC does not specifically mention producer, if UPSC does not specifically mention producer in the question, then it has to be taken. Then it has to be taken with reference to consumer. It has to be taken with reference to consumer. Yes. Three common areas that I have been observing with respect to the supply, demand, price is one, they say, when the oil prices increase. When the oil prices increase. Although we would deal with this dimension more in detail when we are dealing with inflation. But now when the oil prices increase, what do we see? We see that the cost of production increases. Yes or no? Yes. When the cost of production increases, what is happening to the price? Increases. This is at whose side? Consumer. I am not specifying producer. When I don't specify producer, it means consumer. When should you take it from the side of the producer? When it is specifically mentioned. When it is specifically mentioned. That is with respect to this. Now when I look at, for suppose another area is, when I see the machinery cost is increasing. When I see that the machines are getting costly, when I see that the machinery cost is increasing, automatically what is happening? The cost of production is increasing. What is happening to the price from the side of the consumer? Increasing. Increasing. Another area is, for suppose if I say that the import cost is increasing. When I see import cost is increasing, what is happening to cost of production? Increases. Now if I tell you a simple analogy, don't you think this is same as this? Why? Because around 85% of my oil is imported. And my oil happens to be the base for most of my industrial activities. And when the import cost increases, what is happening? The cost of production increases. When the cost of production increases, what is happening to the price? Increases. That is one simple understanding with respect to the pricing aspect. Next, that is supply, demand. Now one small area which UPSC has been talking about is from the dimension of capital. Capital. In general, we see that there are two kinds of capitals. One is working capital, the other one is fixed capital. One is working capital, the other one is fixed capital. When you look at working capital, write down. Always repeating and recurring. Always repeating and recurring. It is meant for short term. It is meant for short term activities. It is meant for short term activities. Fixed capital. Fixed capital. That is long term. Fixed capital, long term. And it is mostly the initial investment. It is mostly the initial investment. Most of the times, it is made on infrastructure. It is made on infrastructure. Yes. Now for suppose, if I am building a house, yes, that is fixed capital or working capital. When I am building a house, it is fixed capital. But when I want to do maintenance, it is what? Working capital. Maintenance of the house is working capital, but house as such is what? Fixed capital. Now just imagine I want to renovate this house. If I want to renovate, now in this renovation also, don't you think I have two things? Now just imagine I am just painting my house. Fixed capital or working capital? Working capital. Now just imagine I am working upon my interior design in the house. It is what? Fixed capital. Something which is long term is going to be fixed, and something which is recurring, something which can be easily replaceable, something which can easily change, that is what? Working capital. But renovation as such, I cannot classify whether it is recurring capital or working capital, because in that also I can have some sub-categorization. Are you understanding this, right? Next. Some basic aspects again. When you talk about aggregate demand, now remember, my dear, that if you are writing prelims exam, if you are not using this equation in the exam hall and coming out, it simply means something went wrong in economy section. Right? If you want, please take a micro xerox of this formula and go to the prelims exam. शायद काम में आ जाए. You can never exit the room of prelims examination without using this formula. If you have exited, it simply means ekkado kirigiri. That's inevitable, right? When we look at aggregate demand, C plus G plus I plus X. I'm not expanding this X. वो हम देख लेंगे international economics में. Because X is what? Imports and exports. Some net phenomena. Now when I see this C deals with consumption expenditure. C deals with consumption expenditure. And when you look at this consumption expenditure, you see that this is going to depend upon the income of a person and also the savings of a person. Because I know that savings is nothing but income minus expenditure. Savings is nothing but income minus expenditure. So I see that this is going to depend upon the income and the savings. And I also see my savings are definitely going to depend upon what is the amount of taxation. And there, do we have any savings now? నాకైతే లేవు. ఎందుకు? Tax. Exorbitant. చెప్పా కదా, other day I think I have shared about my problem. That if I am earning 100 rupees, I am only saving 2 rupees now. Rest other 98 rupees gone. Tax. Right? You should respect that auntie, please. The next one is subsidy. And you also see a factor of inflation. A factor of inflation is going to determine your savings, a tax will determine your savings, and the subsidy will determine your savings. When I look at the second factor, that is the government expenditure. When you look at government expenditure again, government expenditure, it is mostly dealing with what, my dear? It is mostly dealing with the fiscal policy. It is mostly dealing with the fiscal policy. And not only that, you see that whenever I talk about government expenditure, I have two modes or two purposes where you see. One is the developmental expenditure. The other one is welfare expenditure. This is very clear in Andhra Pradesh. The previous regime was what? Welfare. What is the present regime thinking that they are doing? Thinking. Are they really doing? I don't know. We should ask Deputy Chief Minister. Right? I am not very sure about it, but developmental expenditure and welfare expenditure. And you also have to understand, whatever is the government expenditure, the government expenditure will depend upon the revenue of the government. The government expenditure will depend upon the revenue of the government. And we also know that the revenue of the government can be of two types. One is what, my dear? Tax revenue. The other one is the non-tax revenue. For example, can I say disinvestment is a non-tax revenue? Yes. That means some stake of public sector unit is being sold and I am receiving some money for that. The disinvestment is a kind of non-tax revenue. So I see that the revenue factor will include both the tax and non-tax. One. Apart from that, you also see that the nature of government expenditure will depend upon what is the trend or economic necessity. What is the trend or economic necessity? Now when I say economic necessity, don't you think during COVID, what happened? The nature of government expenditure was very, very high. Why? Because at that point of time, it was a demand for welfare, it was a demand for developmental system. And when we look at today, are we having the same necessity? No. One small extended dimension or extended understanding of this is, when we look at this fiscal policy, we see that we have two kinds of fiscal policies which are existing. One is cyclical. The other one is a counter-cyclical. One is cyclical, the other one is counter-cyclical. Now when we look at this cyclical and counter-cyclical, what is the simple understanding? Now first, suppose if the nature of the economy is moving in this way, and if I continue to ensure that my fiscal policy is also moving along this, I am calling it as cyclical. That means the nature of the fiscal policy that is existing is following what? The cycle of the economy. It is following the cycle of the economy. When I am in line with the cycle of the economy, I am calling it as cyclical. But whereas when I look at counter-cyclical, what is observed in the context of counter-cyclical, for suppose if the economy is moving like this, what do you do as a counter-cyclical measure? You move just opposite to the movement of the economic cycle. We move opposite to the movement of the economic cycle. This is the fiscal policy trajectory and this is the nature of economy. Now generally during COVID-19, what did we do? We did this. We were following what kind of approach? Counter-cyclical approach at that point of time. Why? Because economy was slowing down, economy was moving down. But what was the nature of the expenditure that was happening? Counter to the cycle of the economy. So that is what we understand and that is what we see with respect to the government expenditure. The fiscal policy can be cyclical and counter-cyclical depending upon the nature of the economy, depending upon the economic necessity. When we look at the third factor, that is the factor with respect to investment. When you look at the third factor, that is factor with respect to investment, you see that this is majorly what? The corporate investment. Majorly the corporate investment. And this corporate investments will include two things, my dear. One is the domestic investments, the other one is the international investments. Both the factors have to be considered here because at the end of the day we are in an open economic system. We are in a global economic system. So we see that it is domestic and international which are considered there, which are taken care there. Now when you look at this investment dimension which is existing, you see that the investment will depend upon the nature of interest rate. That means especially the credit policy from the side of banking sector. It will depend upon the nature of interest rate. And not only that, it also depends upon the growth prospects of the country. It also depends upon the growth prospects of the country. And not only the growth prospects of the country, but it also depends upon the savings and the profit margin of the country, of the company, sorry. The savings and the profit margin of the company also determines what is the nature of investment. And what is going to determine my savings? My savings are going to be determined by something called as corporate tax. How much I am paying to the government. If I am paying more corporate tax, will I have more savings or less savings? Less savings. So I see that is going to depend upon the corporate tax. And not only that it is going to depend upon corporate tax, but you also see it is depending upon cost of production. It is also depending upon cost of production. Why? Because I definitely know lesser the cost of production, more the profit or less the profit? More the profit. That is why they say promote MSMEs. Why promoting MSMEs is important? Forget about the lower rung economy and lower rung employment. Cost of production is less. When the cost of production is less, automatically the profit margins which are earned is more. So that is one simple understanding that you have to observe here. Then apart from that, you also see this will also depend upon the market. This will also depend upon the market or the consumer base. The nature of market and the consumer base. And don't you think these investments will also depend upon the global scenario? Now, especially somebody like Trump Mama coming into regime is a difficult thing. Now you see what is happening to gold prices and what has happened to share market. What is gold price today? 10 grams around 83,000 rupees. Yes or no? 83,000. Right? So that means we see that the investment will also depend upon global scenario. Why? Because one simple factor which is determining my investment is very simple. In any context I see, when look at this Harrod-Domer model, what is happening in Harrod-Domer model, you see, it is purely a cycle of investment, income, savings, investment. It is purely a cycle of investments, income and savings. That means when the investments increase, what is happening to income? Increase. Resulting in increase in savings. And when the savings increase, automatically what is happening? Investments. This model is valid for an organization, for a respective country and for individual as well. I can have the system to be valid. For example, now just imagine in the context of individual. When the investment increases, what is happening? Employment increases, income increases, the individual savings increase. Again further the system is going to be established. So that is what is one simple understanding with respect to Harrod-Domer model, and that is one simple understanding with respect to aggregate demand. I am not discussing much about this. Like just wait for international economics. When we are discussing about international economics, that is where I will talk everything about exports, imports, exchange rate and the respective aspects. Now, in any economy, especially to be very precise in Indian economy, I see there are some policies which are ensured, and in that one is the monetary policy, the other one is the fiscal policy. One is the monetary policy, the other one is the fiscal policy. Now when we look at fiscal policy, we know that it majorly deals with whom? Government. Here we know it deals with RBI. But you have to understand both are dependent on each other. You have to understand that both are dependent upon each other. And one thing that you have to understand with respect to RBI, you see that center can dictate terms to RBI. Center can dictate terms to RBI, that is what is seen in section 7 of RBI Act. That means if some suggestion, if some recommendation is made by the center to the RBI, it is binding on the RBI to follow it. That means, is Indian monetary policy independent system? It can have an intervention of government. It can have an intervention of government. That is what is seen categorically in section 7. That is what is seen categorically in section 7, where you see that it can have a respective intervention from the side of the government. Now keeping that in mind, you also see that when we talk about this fiscal policy to a larger extent, I see that there can be two kinds which are existing here. One is a condition of fiscal stimulus, and one is a condition of austerity measures. One is a condition of fiscal stimulus, the other one is a condition of austerity measures. When I look at this condition of fiscal stimulus to a larger extent, what do you see? Fiscal stimulus simply means I am reducing taxation, I am increasing expenditure of the government. I am reducing the taxation, I am increasing the expenditure of the government, or I see that the revenue of the government is seen to be reducing but the expenditure is increasing. I am stimulating the economy. That is what is understood in the context of fiscal stimulus. Now whenever you find this fiscal stimulus, this is from the side of the government. But don't you think from the side of the people what is happening? The savings will increase. Yes, expenditure from the side of the people, that also will increase. And don't you think, when I say this expenditure is increasing, what is going to happen to the demand? Increases. This is from the side of the government. This is from the side of whom? Individual or the citizens? Individual or the citizens, I see that as the expenditure from the side of the government increases, savings increase, expenditure increase, and more than anything I see demand increasing. Aggregate demand wala formula, you apply that. Yes. And when I look at austerity measures, what is seen to be happening in the context of austerity measures, again, you see that the tax rates are seen to be increasing. The tax rates are seen to be increasing. That means what is happening to the government expenditure? Is it increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. Now for example, there were a number of countries in Europe which had underwent these austerity measures. A classic example is Greece. And most of these pigs countries, Portugal, Italy, Greece, those are what are called as pigs. Especially during 2014, 2015, they were categorically known for undergoing austerity measures. And आजकल क्या चल रहा है? Venezuela, Argentina. Now people are selling currency in kgs. Have you seen those visuals? Yes? So that means mostly what? Austerity measures is what is observed. Right? Now write down 2-3 lines here. Subsidy is an expenditure of government. Subsidies is expenditure of government. Next, tax expenditure. Tax expenditure is a burden which is paid by the government. Burden which is paid by the government in giving certain tax subsidies or rebates. Now when giving certain tax subsidies or rebates, for example, Honorable Finance Minister, you don't write that. I told in the last, right? Now that means yesterday our Honorable Finance Minister has announced that till 12 lakhs, no tax. 12 lakhs. Enjoy. But in that context, what is the meaning? That government is going to pay tax for the 12 lakhs which you are earning. And that is what is called as tax expenditure. Many of you will think that tax expenditure means the cost that is involved in collecting the tax. No. That is not tax expenditure. Tax expenditure simply means the burden that is upon the government in giving you tax rebates or tax subsidies. Just told you this. Are you understanding this, right? So that is one simple dimension. Next. I was also talking about investments. When we look at investments, we see that domestic and foreign, and again foreign investments can be what? FDI, FII. FDI, FII or FPI or QPI, any of those. Foreign institutional investments, foreign portfolio investments, qualified portfolio or qualified institutional investors, QPI or QII, any of those. Now when you look at the simple difference that we have seen, if any investment is more than 10%, that is what is considered as FDI. Just to give a quantitative number to this, we have, if it is more than 10%, that means what is this 10%? The capital investment has to be more than 10%. But if the capital investment is less than 10%, it is what? FII, FPI, QPI. And when I see this FDI as such, I know that there is greater proportion of capital investment. I see that the capital investment is more than 10%. That simply implies that FDI is what? Long term or short term? It is long term. And is it capital investment? Yes, majorly capital in nature. And not only that, it majorly deals with technology and infra. It majorly deals with technology and infra. But whereas when we look at QPI, FII or FPI, we see that these investments are not long term, but these investments are short term. And not only this dimension, we see that the nature of investments are financial, majorly financial. Those are what? Capital in nature. But here, financial, that means these are driven by the motto of what? Profits. Right? They are driven by the motto of profits. Now, out of FDI, FII, FPI, QPI, which is more volatile in nature? This is more volatile in nature. That is why it is what is called as what? Hot money. It is what is called as hot money. It is more volatile in nature. And in order to reduce the level of volatility that is existing in the system, that is where we had gone for Tobin tax. That is where we had gone for Tobin tax. When we say Tobin tax is fundamentally to reduce the volatility that is seen to be existing because of FPI or FII or QPI. Because I know that there is more permanency, I know that there is more certainty in the context of FDI. But it's not the case with respect to FII or FPI or QPI. That is why we see, in fact, sometimes they use this channel for money laundering, sometimes they use this channel for round tripping as a phenomenon. That you would discuss little later. Okay? So that is one understanding. Then apart from that, there is one small learning that we have to have regarding something called as transfer payments. Transfer payments. Now when you talk about this transfer payments, you see that these are unconditional transfers. That means I don't have any condition implied, these are unconditional transfers. And not only that these are unconditional transfers, but these are non-reciprocal transfers. That means, is taxation non-reciprocal? No. Right? In general, these are non-reciprocal transfers. Are they two-sided or are they one-sided? They are one-sided transfers. They are one-sided transfers, they are unconditional transfers, and they are non-reciprocal transfers. For example, you would have heard about universal basic income. Yes? One more contextual to us is the unemployment allowance. Nirudyoga Bhruti. Avuna kada? Right? What kind of unemployment are we facing? Posh. We are facing what? Frictional. But although we are facing structural, but we are thinking that we are facing frictional. It is not by chance, but it is by manchi simple right? So that is one dimension that you have to understand with respect to transfer payments. Right? Last section of this is growth, inflation, conflict. Growth, inflation, conflict. When you look at this growth, inflation, conflict, again please understand it is an interplay of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. It is an interplay of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Now this is price, this is growth. In general, when I see this is a curve of aggregate demand, this is a curve of aggregate supply. And the point of inflection or the point of meeting is what is understood as the market equilibrium. That is what is understood as market equilibrium. When I say market equilibrium, that simply means what? At market equilibrium, I have a stable price. I have a stable price. And not only that I have a stable price, but I also see I have an optimum market. Not too much, not too less. Market equilibrium simply implies optimization of the market, and not only market optimization, but it also deals with the dimensions of stability in the price. And when you look at this, what happens is at times, because of some dynamics which are existing, I see this aggregate demand or aggregate supply fluctuating around. And when I see these fluctuations of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, for suppose if I say there is fluctuation in aggregate demand, there is fluctuation in aggregate demand. What is observed at the initial point, I say if this is P and this is G. Now at this point what is happening? This is P1, this is G1. That means it is very sure here that if there is a change or an increase in aggregate demand, I see that there is an increase in growth. Fantastic. But the problem with this increase in the growth is it comes at the cost of increase in price. It comes at the cost of increase in price. That means whenever I find an economy being driven by demand, I would definitely see that the growth and inflation are coexisting. What is inflation? General rise in price. General rise in price is what is inflation. And you observe that any economy is demand driven. Growth, price coexist. That is where I say growth, inflation, conflict. So if I have to avoid this condition, I will have to shift towards aggregate supply. That is why production becomes important. That is why industrial sector becomes important. Why? Because when we look at the shift in the aggregate supply, when I see the shift in the aggregate supply, what is happening to this pink line? This is P2 and this is G2. P1 was greater than P and G1 was greater than G. Fantastic. This was a condition when? Aggregate demand. In aggregate supply, what happened, my dear? P2 is less than P, but G2 is greater than G. That means what is seen to be happening? Price less, growth more. The simplest conflict resolution is not operating on aggregate demand, but operating on aggregate supply. Not operating on aggregate demand, but operating on aggregate supply. That is why the production sector becomes extremely important. Because with the shift in aggregate supply, what is happening? I am having growth increasing, but is the price increasing? No. Right? Graphal juicesi, formulas juicesi, ededo anukokandi. All that you will have to do is follow my words and whatever is going on the board. And this is the simplest form of representation that anybody can imagine on basic economics. And if you want, you can test this out. जाके कोई भी basic economy के ऊपर PYQ देख लेना. Your accuracy ratio will be 100% and nothing less than that. Are you getting this dimension? Yes? Beautiful. Decrease కాదు, increase. Right word shift అవుతుంది సుదేష్. అమర్. Right? ఆపేద్దామా? కాదు, వినే వాళ్ళకి ఎట్లుంటే చెప్పేవాడికి ఎట్లుండాలి కదా? అవునా? రైట్. ఎందుకు? మామూలు మై రెగ్యులర్ క్లాస్ డైలాగ్, వేడి వేడి సెగ, వేడి కూడా కాదు, వేడి. ఎస్. నెక్స్ట్ అయిపోయింది, లాస్ట్ 1 page. Your favorite section. Accounting. Right? రాత్రికి నిద్ర పట్టకూడదు. GDP, GNP, factor cost, market price, basic price. We'll see, not an issue. When we look at GDP, GDP is nothing but value of all goods and services. Value of all goods and services, but the condition is what? Within the territory. That means that is the factor that I see called as domestic. When you look at this factor of GNP, you see that GNP is nothing but GDP plus net factor income from abroad. GDP plus net factor income from abroad. And when I say net factor income from abroad, you see this is dealing with Indians in India and Indians outside India. Both these considerations are existing here. And when we look at net factor, NFIA is majorly what? We see it is about Indians minus the foreigners' contribution. Indians minus the foreigner contribution. Now, one more thing that you have to understand, that it is not necessary that GDP is greater than GNP, and it is not necessary that GNP is greater than GDP. Now, don't simply be moved away by these positive symbols which are existing in middle. I can have GDP less than GNP. I can have GNP less than GDP. Now, just imagine if net factor income becomes minus. If there are more foreigners who are contributing, there are more Indians. If it becomes minus, GNP will be less than GDP. So it is not an always condition that GDP greater than GNP or GNP greater than GDP. It is case by case basis. One. Then, when I look at NDP, NDP is what? I know that anything that is net is gross minus depreciation. And when we say NNP, it is what? GNP minus depreciation, gross minus depreciation. Anything that is net is what? Gross minus depreciation. Yes. Now, when you look at this factor of NNP, you see that NNP at factor cost. NNP at factor cost, it is what is considered as what, my dear? It is what is considered as national income. Now this is on a initial condition. But to a larger extent at present, what is the change? NNP at market price. NNP at market price is what is considered as what, my dear? Is what is considered as national income. Just write down 2 lines. Factor cost. Factor cost. The total cost of all factors. The total cost of all factors of production, comma, price of the commodity from the producer side. Price of the commodity from the producer side. Comma, it also includes government subsidies. It also includes government subsidies. Next, market price. Write down. The price at which the price at which the product is sold at the market. It includes the taxes imposed. It includes the taxes imposed and excludes the subsidies. Yes. Last 5 minutes, don't worry. Basic price, factor cost plus production taxes minus production subsidies. Production taxes minus production subsidies. Market price is basic price plus product taxes minus product subsidies. Next, market price can also be expressed as factor cost plus indirect taxes minus subsidies. Factor cost plus indirect taxes minus subsidies. Right? So that is the true translation of basic price, factor cost, market price. Next, personal income. Personal income is national income minus undivided profits minus net interest payments minus corporate tax plus transfer payments. Personal disposable income. Personal disposable income. Personal income minus taxes plus subsidies. Personal income minus taxes plus subsidies. Yes? GDP at current prices. GDP at current prices is nothing but nominal GDP, and GDP at constant prices is nothing but real GDP. And I see one important factor called as GDP deflator. And GDP deflator is nominal GDP to real GDP. It simply means that real GDP plus inflation by real GDP, which can also imply 1 plus inflation by real GDP. Simple calculation, right? Cancel real GDP, and then go that side. 1 plus inflation by, because people get dyslexic when they see numbers and equations. I don't understand. Kani 10th lo maths lo 99 unde. Right? They were favorite students of maths, madam. What to do? So 1 plus inflation by real GDP. ठीक है? Write down. Last. ఏం లేదు. 5 lines. అంతకన్నా ఎక్కువ అయితే రేపు క్లాస్కి రాకండి. Write down. GDP deflator. It is a parameter. It's a parameter which considers the inflation in a particular reference period. It does not have It does not have a fixed basket of goods and services. It does not have a fixed basket of goods and services. Unlike the other measurements of inflation, Next, it includes the inflation regarding those goods which are domestically produced, in bracket you write, it does not include imports and exports. It does not include imports and exports. Right? Now simple read would be, maybe you can go and read 12th class macroeconomics textbook. Right? I would say it is a mandatory read for you to sit down in the further classes of economy. It hardly takes 3-4 hours for you to finish that book. It's a small book. 12th class macroeconomics textbook, please read that and come for tomorrow's class. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.